Good evening, viewers, and welcome to Face the Nation, an in-depth current affairs program here on ZBC TV. My name is Mirazim Siwa, your host. As you are aware, viewers, the summer cropping season is upon us, and farmers have expressed the optimism of the season following the forecasting by the Meteorological Department services to say that we're going to receive normal to above normal rainfall. And as we are aware that the government is also preparing for the summer cropping season, and there are various support that comes from government, some from the Presidential Input Support Scheme. And to help us discuss that issue, we have a distinct honor to speak to the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Dr. Masuka. Minister, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Minister, to start off, we're coming from a winter cropping season where government has recorded an unprecedented bumper harvest. What do you attribute that success to?
Well, in 2019, we only had 94,000 metric tons of wheat, and we have an unprecedented 640,000 metric tons from approximately 122,000 hectares. We owe this to the astute leadership of the President, His Excellency Dr. Mnangagwa, who indicated that we needed to prime this country for food security and food sovereignty, and with it, put it very robust plans to ensure that we accelerate irrigation development so that we could produce the wheat on an entirely irrigated crop. Also, government crowding in the private sector so that they can contribute at least 40% of their annual raw material requirement through contracting farmers. Government itself is also a presidential input program which supports smallholder farmers. But the Agricultural and Rural Development Authority, which is now the food security agent for the nation, has come in to put in an additional 60,000. So it is a multi-stakeholder effort facilitated by government, which has led to this stellar performance.
Maybe the viewers may want to know that how much have we received? What was our set target?
The target was 120,000 hectares to produce 600,000 metric tons at an average of 5 tons per hectare. And all the wheat is literally in now. A lot of marketing has taken place. Over 250,000 metric tons of wheat has already been marketed to various off-takers.
Now that we are now in the summer cropping season, can you give us an insight on our target production or the hectares that we may want to put under maize production?
Well, the summer planning season is always premised on the forecast for the season. But for planning purposes, we always plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we climate-proof agriculture, whether we have anticipated rains or not. Fortunately, for this season, we have a normal to above normal rainfall season predicted. But our planning target for cereals is 3.2 million metric tons. And the cereals that we're accounting for summer are maize, pale millet, finger millet, and sorghum. And this will be planted on 2.6 million hectares. We think that once we produce the 3.2 million metric tons, that will be sufficient to assure the nation of our food and feed requirements, estimated at between 2.2 million and 2.5 million. So we'll have a very healthy surplus, which will allow us to replenish the strategic grain reserve. But we are doing this at two levels. First, it is at the smallholder level, largely financed by the government through the Presidential Input Scheme, and we are targeting 3 million farmers.
Would you say that these targets are achievable with the forecasting of the rain season?
Certainly achievable. In fact, we think we can surpass these targets just like we have done with the wheat. You recall that last year we also did 2.6 million hectares of cereals and we had 2.9 million metric tons of the various cereals. For the first time in the country's history, ZIMSTATS led an exercise where we looked at the post-harvest aspects. This then contextualized the harvest that we had projected, because that projection was based on the standing maize in the field. So there was an adjustment of the maize volume from 2.2 million, which was the standing estimated harvest in the field, and to now what farmers had in their granaries in storage was 1.8 million metric tons, a 20% post-harvest loss, which was less than the regional average. But even with that, we know that the statistics as led by Zimstats are very correct, and that context is important. So we are very confident that the targets will be met.
You mentioned the Presidential Input Support Scheme. Can you just give us insights of this climate-proofed Presidential Input Support Scheme, and which regions have so far received this support, because we're already in the planting season?
Last year, you recall that we had 3.5 million beneficiaries, and we targeted 500,000 urban, peri-urban, because there was a drought. This year, the focus is simply on communal, small scale, and A1 of the 3 million beneficiaries. So we are also doing what is called agroecological tailoring, that those that are in drier regions will receive traditional grains, and those in higher rainfall regions will receive maize. So we target to have 60,000 metric tons of compound D, 60,000 metric tons of AA, and about 10,000 metric tons of maize seed, 4,900 metric tons of traditional grains. We have moved already to the GMB depots over 30% of the basal, AN, and maize requirements. We are accelerating distribution of these to the various depots and to the wards. You will recall that last Friday in Incisa, Ward 22, we launched the summer 2025-2026 Presidential Inputs Program, and we distributed inputs to Matwele South and Matwele North. So distribution has started in earnest, and the ward committees are already active distributing these to the various beneficiaries.
What is the distribution criterion? Because some of the communal farmers, some say they don't receive, some say that probably what we receive is not enough for the land that we would have prepared.
Presidential Input Program is climate-proofed input program, and is based on Pfumvudza Intwasa principles, which are sustainable, intensive conservation farming. This is science-based, this is fact, this is precision farming at a micro level. So we expect each of these beneficiaries to have put in 3 plots. So 3 plots qualifies you for the Presidential Input Program. So farmers can self-discriminate by not doing so. If they don't, then they are not part of that. But however, there are exceptions. The elderly, disabled, and child-headed families, we say these will qualify because they are the most vulnerable, and we ask communities to assist them to do the mandatory 3 plots. Cumulatively, there are 14 million Pfumvudza plots across the country that have been done this year, from 8.1 million last year, over a 70% increase. So I'm very optimistic that no one will discriminate themselves from receiving the presidential inputs by not doing the mandatory 3 plots.
Let's talk about return on investment. You're supporting 3 million households, and in the harvest that we received in the previous summer, 2024-2025 summer cropping season, how much was their contribution?
Well, the return on investment is easier from the input side. If we give a bag of fertilizer, a compound, a bag of top dressing, 2 kgs of seed and all that, and fall armyworm chemical and perhaps a knapsack sprayer, the total support for each beneficiary is about $100. This will enable them to do 3 plots with a minimum of 500 kgs for each of those plots. That's 1.5 tons. When we went to Incisa, we saw that Ms. Dube had actually done 3.75 tons from the 3 plots or so. So, and if they sold that, they will be able to generate $1,000 to $1,500 out of an investment of $100. So this is not a subsidy program. This is an investment. The option is each of these households and beneficiaries requires 500 kgs of grain support if we were to do social welfare, which would mean that you'd have to pay much more. So looked at from any perspective, this is a productive social investment and not a subsidy program.
Those are very interesting statistics. Well, viewers, as we reflect on that point, let us take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation, and we are in conversation with the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Dr. Anxious Masuka. Our farmers continue to have persistent problems, challenges, especially when it comes to the payment for deliveries that they made to the Grain Marketing Board. What is the challenge?
First, I must start by unreservedly apologizing on behalf of government for the delayed payment to farmers. This is unintentional. We are mobilizing with Treasury the resources that are required to make good the debt that government owes. The government owes 16 million US dollars to farmers and 271 million ZIG, collectively about 26, 27 million US dollars. And we're in conversation with Treasury to ensure that we can surmount that. Ordinarily, we say that from a policy perspective, we must pay farmers within 72 hours of delivery, and this has not been the case because of the competing needs for scarce national resources at Treasury. That notwithstanding, we have now put in place what we call a crop purchase buffer fund, which I hope will be operationalized soon, which will be a fund established at AFC, which will be summoned to pay farmers timeously should there be a cash flow dislocation at Treasury. And we're at a very advanced stage working on this facility. So it is my expectation that going into the future, farmers will not see these delayed payments. But we also must look at this in the context of the increased volumes of production, which have brought in this strain on the cash flow. In the past, because our production was very low, it was very easy for Treasury to pay. But now we're talking of increased quantities of crops that have to be delivered and paid on time. That is why resources are becoming scarce and scarce. And we think that as government, we have a very robust plan to ensure that this is eliminated and that in future we are able to timeously pay farmers as they deliver.
The government always talk about the private-public partnership as a mitigation measure to these financial challenges that you always encounter. Are there any private partnerships that your government is facilitating with our farmers?
That's one of the innovative aspects that government has done in terms of the agriculture, food systems and rural transformation strategy 1, and of course strategy 2, 2026 to 2030, with what we call structured market liberalization, where we have encouraged and now used the law to allow the private sector to procure their annual grain requirements through contracting local farmers. So we expect that 40% of the annual raw material requirement of any off-taker, a miller or so, will be secured through direct financing. So we now have 5 mechanisms of financing farmers through this structured financing and liberalization of the markets. First, we have the Presidential Input Program, where beneficiaries produce for their own household food security, but they are obligated to sell the surplus to the GMB. Then the second is what you used to call command agriculture, mediated through banks, CBZ, AFC, NMB. Now those contract farmers and directly off-take and sell to best advantage. Then we have the private sector under the auspices of the Food Contractors Association, who also contract this season. They are looking at about 50 to 60,000 hectares that they are directly contracting. But because of this liberalization, we need a food security agent, which is why we need now the Agriculture and Rural Development Authority to contract. And this year they are contracting 100,000 metric tons, which will be delivered to the GMB. Then, of course, we have so many people in the rural areas who use their own resources to grow on their own plots. And for purposes of the law, we say these are self-contracted. So these are the 5 contracting arrangements. As we do this, we find that the market share for GMB, for example, summer last year, over 1 million metric tons was marketed. GMB's market share is only 9-10% of what comes through the Presidential Input Program and the other financed. The rest, people must be able to market to their contracted. So this is the essence of the structured market liberalization, to allow the state to focus on facilitating production by crowding in the private sector, but also providing this backup for the vulnerable people through the Productive Social Investment Program, Fumvuza Intwasa. And we think that going forward, and with the Crop Purchase Buffer Fund, we should be able to have a very healthy production environment and farmers being paid timeously, whether they deliver to the GMB or any other private off-taker.
The other challenge that our farmers face is the climate change. What are we doing to make sure that are there any maybe mechanisms to adapt to this new climate that we experience now? Because we used to receive rains early, now we're receiving late into...
The context in which we've couched the agriculture, food systems and rural transformation strategy is that climate change is a constant. So it is something that is with us, and within that context, we must produce enough. So that is why we've said we need climate-smart agriculture. In that climate-smart agriculture, we've said we're going to do interventions at 2 levels. The first level is at household level. Adopting Pfumvudza into us as a model is a climate-smart, climate-proofing intervention. But that must be complemented by what we call agroecological tailoring of crops. That whatever is grown in an agroecological region must be determined by the exigencies of that agroecological region and not necessarily what the farmer wants. So if you are in region 4 and 5, the drier regions, you should grow traditional grains that are more drought tolerant. And if you are in higher rainfall areas, you may opt to do maize. That is at the smallholder level, at household level. At a national level, we must climate-proof our agriculture through increased irrigation development, which is why we are targeting the 496,000 hectares by 2030. As of yesterday, we had 224,000 hectares under irrigation, which is why we've been able to do this successful wheat production. But the thrust is to be able to do more dams, to complement the 10,600 dams that we already have. But more importantly, to say that government can't do it alone, we want the private sector to complement this government effort by providing an investment that allows private sector investment to attract private capital into irrigation development on existing dams so we can accelerate this climate proofing at a national level. I'm very confident that the path that we've taken, climate proofing at a household level, at a national level, will ensure that Zimbabwe will have enough food whether it rains or not. And as we complement that, we are doing accelerated silo expansion to bring our storage capacity from 750,000 silo space to 1.5 million metric tons, so that we are able to store 3 years grain, so that should it rain or not, we will still be assured of this and assuring this nation of food security.
Very insightful and powerful information there about climate change. Well, viewers, let us take a short break. Please don't go away. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are still talking to the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development, Dr. Anxious Masuka. Minister, before we went for a break, you were talking about climate change. But the Second Republic had the emphasis of utilizing every other water body that we have as a way of adapting to the climate change. What are the strategies that you are using to adapt to climate change? And of the existing water bodies that we have, how much are we utilizing?
Well, the strategy has been refined within the context of the agriculture, food systems and rural transformation strategy. And we're starting at village level, where we are putting a ball in each village to build the resilience of communities. That's why we talk about the 35,000 villages and 35,000 balls to form village business units. We've done 4,600 balls and over 1,000 village business units already. Then, of course, we are looking at A1 farmers and those old irrigation schemes, where we are transforming them to become a viable, sustainable schemes, which is why we are forming the 460 irrigation scheme business units. We are also saying that there is a productivity booster kit that we've said for A1 farmers that were given land where there was irrigation. Government is coming in, now we are doing a pilot of 10,000 A1 farmers 10,000 hectares, where we give each a unit to be able to irrigate 1 to 2 hectares between 3 and 6,000 US payable over 7 years, so that we can capacitate them to also face the vicissitudes of climate change. But we are saying also, we have so many dams that were constructed, and we've highlighted this aspect that we have the most dams in Africa, but yet we still face drought linked to cyclical rainfall patterns. We should wean ourselves of reliance on rainfall for production, which is why we should accelerate irrigation. The government has come up with what we call the dam is an economy model. And this is what the Second Republic has done, that other than just doing a dam like Tugwimukosi, like we used to do in the past, Tugwimukosi, the dam is not the project, but what the water is intended to do. So Tugwimukosi, at construction, we should have looked at the dam impounding the water itself, then doing irrigation development for the communities around, for rural development. For Vision 2030, we should have done drinking water for those communities. Then each dam must generate its own electricity, and there must be a fisheries component. So these 5 elements now constitute the project. Now, once we've recast this, it means you can attract the private sector, because now a dam is an economy. Someone can invest and they can get a return on investment over a defined period. And we've actually now begun to see movement at Tugwimukosi, we're doing Kunzvi, we're doing Gwaishangani, and many more. We were beginning to see this model work, and we launched it in Chivu, when we did Chivu Dam, where there's now irrigation, water treatment, and everything. And this is what we would like to do for all the dams going forward. So with these various strands, from village to A1 to the large dams, we are actually seeing that we will be able to accelerate the development of irrigation, and I'm very confident that the 496,000 hectares that we want to achieve by 2030 will be attained well before that.
Now, we witnessed the launch of your agriculture, food systems, and rural transformation strategy 2026 to 2030. So, how is that going to then contribute, or how much of that is going to fit into this strategy? Well, how many dams are we likely to see coming up until 2030?
Well, on the 29th of October, the President launched the Agriculture, Food Systems and Rural Transformation Strategy 2. It is undergirdled by 5 mandates that the ministry has, which is assurance of food security and food sovereignty, nutrition improvement, livelihoods improvement, economic development catalyzed by agriculture, but also preservation of peace and stability, and reaffirmation of our international boundaries, building a $15.8 billion agricultural sector able to undergirdle economic growth, because we're an agro-based economy. So that's the essence of the agriculture, food systems, and rural transformation strategy. But saying, in order to do all this, the basis and context must be climate change. We must climate-proof agriculture. We must accelerate the usage of existing dams, water bodies, so that they can contribute economically. Otherwise, that water is just dead water at this stage.
15.8 billion is a very high target. Do you think it's achievable?
It is a very low target. We think we'll surpass that. In 2020, we had a $5.6 billion industry, and we had projected that by 2025 will be an $8.2 billion industry, but we achieved a $10.3 billion industry. So $15.8 billion, I think, is very conservative, and at the pace at which we are developing, I think we'll surpass that before 2030.
So why is that the prices of the locally produced agricultural products is not reflective of those figures?
Certainly, you are seeing stability in the market in terms of supply and demand, and we are still a high production base on account of more expensive inputs. 30 to 40% of the cost of production for maize is fertilizer, because we largely import that. If we're able to localize these important value chains for our inputs, certainly we'll be able to lower the cost of production, which would make it more profitable, more viable, and more sustainable to produce. This would then feed into the whole value chain and ensure that the product at the table is also appropriately priced. But we want to work to increase own production and to localize value chains and to assure the nation that they will be able to have affordable, available, and appropriately priced products.
As a mitigation strategy, do you think that we need to also capacitate our local fertilizer manufacturers to make sure that they meet the national demand?
Certainly the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, which leads this sector, is chairing an interministerial committee directed by Cabinet to be able to deal with this perennial issue that is nagging the nation and resuscitating existing plans such as Doro, Zimfo, ZFC, Windmill, Sebo, in addition to looking at newer technology of producing fertilizer. We are looking at gas with Invictus in Mzarabani. We are also looking at coal to fertilizer production. So there are lots of discussions that are taking place, and quite a lot of investors interested in coming into this space. I think that it will just be a matter of time before we see fertilizer production increasing locally and having an impact on our cost of production, which would ultimately be good for everyone.
What are some of the government's plans with or towards cash crops like cotton, tobacco?
Tobacco is a shining example in that we've managed to increase this to a record production of 355 million kilograms, and farmers were paid $1.2 billion. The 135,000 farmers were paid each on average about $9,000, which is very good. 85% of the producers are smallholder farmers, and over 60% of these are beneficiaries of the land reform program, which attests to the success of the land reform program. With cotton production, we've not done so well, although we do have plans to increase cotton production to over 300,000 metric tons by 2030. We have a dual financing system for cotton, where government is assisting with the presidential cotton input scheme, and the off-taker is COTCO. And we hope that once the issues at COTCO are resolved and COTCO is able to have a stronger balance sheet, they will be able to finance this aspect. While we crowd in the private sector, we already have 4 or 5 companies that are contracting cotton, and we want to be able to create this space where we want the off-takers, spinners and weavers to come and participate in value chain financing so they can secure their raw material through their own effort. And we want them to abide by the policy direction that 40% of their annual raw material requirement is secured through their own effort, through contracting, while government provides this enabling environment that enables these actors to respect the contract. There is side marketing in cotton, which we are dealing with, and I hope that with the biometric registration that we have succeeded in doing in the tobacco sector, as we do biometrics within the cotton sector, we will reduce and eventually eliminate side marketing so that we can create a very strong value chain.
Well, Minister, Zimbabwe used to be a bread basket of Africa, and now you're talking about 15.8 billion. When are we likely to see the country restoring its status again?
There are 2 things that we don't want it to be. First, there is the notion that there is a cash crop and a staple crop. That's archaic. Maize is a cash crop. Cotton is a cash crop. Tobacco is a cash crop. We need farming as a business. Whether they are doing mananga, whether they are doing rape or maize, the business aspect must be the driver to produce for yourself and to feed the nation. So it must be a business entry, kuinda kumunda, kuinda kubasa. That principle and philosophy ought to be ingrained in our farmers, which is now why we've changed agritechs to become agricultural business advisors, because agriculture has become a business at every level, at every scale. Whether they're doing 1 chick or whether they're doing 1 hectare or 1,000 hectares, it must be a business. Then the second notion that we must dispel is that we don't want Zimbabwe to become a bread basket. We want Zimbabwe to become the agro-industrial hub of the region. By dint of geography, Zimbabwe is centrally located in Southern Africa, is a very good talent in terms of human resources, is very good soils, is very good weather, and very good logistics. So we think we must go beyond breadbasket to become this agro-industrial hub. And we've seen that because we already supply 63% of raw materials into manufacturing. And by growing that, it is possible that we'll go beyond that and be able to do that for the region. You know that the WFP has intimated that Zimbabwe could be the logistics hub for its food requirement for Southern Africa. And it is something that we would like to build upon to ensure that we become this enviable agro-industrial hub to spur industrialization in rural areas and in cities so that Zimbabwe can be this upper middle income society by 2030.
Well, viewers, that brings us to the end of this program. Till we meet again next time, stay informed and stay engaged.